Hello everybody. So I'm making this YouTube video um, because I see a lot of recommendations for the Ubiquiti wireless access points, and I kind of wanted to share my experience with those devices. Um, and the goal of this video isn't to kind of turn people off to the Ubiquiti products, um, but rather to give a perspective. So you should always take it with a grain of salt, whether it's a positive review or a negative review. Um, what the way that people have, because that may not be your experience. Um, so, about a year and a half ago, I purchased three Ubiquiti long range access points, the unified 8LR access points. Um, because I was in a house that had poor coverage. So we had two levels. We had um, we had the basement, and then we had the upstairs living area, and we just simply weren't getting the coverage we needed. And so I bought two of them to kind of do this Venn diagram thing in the house where we would have two access points. Um, we would have two access points, and then it would kind of cover the entire house. But what I found is that the a single LR access point could cover the entire house if it was positioned properly. So if I put it in the middle of the house, then it covered enough that I didn't need any of the other ones. Um, One of the things that the unified LR access points offer is something called zero handoff. Um, and so what that is if you have two access points and you're roaming from one to the other, it would seamlessly pass your connection from one access point to the other. It sounds fantastic. Um, and it worked once I got the configuration down, but there is some configuration that goes into that that is something that you're going to have to consider. There's very specific settings in order for that to work. Um, so it's something to consider. But of course, like I said, I simply needed one because it was probably an 800 square feet house, maybe 900, and we simply weren't getting the coverage in the back bedrooms because the access point was on the other side of the house, and there was no way to move it because it was fiber, and that's where it introduced into the house, the demarcation point. So, um, but the problem I ran into was the speeds. So I not only bought three unified LR access points, but I also bought the Edge Router Lite. And I bought several Linksys switches. Um, They were gigabit switches. So I bought a lot of networking equipment to make sure that, once I was done, everything worked flawlessly. But the problem is once it was set up, whether I had the two or whether I just had the one, um, the problem was that the speeds were just terrible. So I would get um, 10 megabit maybe, and sometimes less than 5. And this is across multiple different devices. So I tried it on my iPhone, my wife's Android device, my laptop, my desktop, my wife's laptop, and these are different manufacturers. Some of them, like my desktop was a custom built desktop, so it had custom built components. My laptop was an HP. My wife's was another HP, but it was a different model. And of course, the handheld devices, my iPhone, my iPad, her Android device, everything was terrible. So we barely had enough speed for one device to stream Netflix, which is surprising to me because my roommate at the time said that they had, after they were kicked off of Mediacom's cable for DMCA notifications. Mediacom has a 3 strikes rule. After 3 strikes, they kill your account, and that's pretty much it. You can't get service anymore. So they did that, and they ended up having to go to DSL, and they said that DSL only provided like 5 megabit. They said that it was enough for 2 devices to stream Netflix simultaneously and no lag. So here I was with this access point that was supposed to be fantastic, and it simply couldn't provide the speeds. And the thing is that, pardon me, Blue Moon, I recommend it. The problem is that if we used a regular router, I think I had I think it was a Netgear router. The speeds were fine. They were, about 50 megabit, what you'd expect for, that type of wireless access, or that wireless access point or protocol, rather. I think it was N. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was N. So, 54 megabits about where that maxes out at. So, when we used a regular router, we were getting those speeds. And so I did a site survey. I used an application called INSSIDER, Insider. And basically, I checked the channels to make sure there wasn't channel saturation, because that's a giant thing. If you have, all of your neighbors are camping on channel 6, and you've got your router set on auto, and it's camping on channel 6, then of course you're going to get crappy speeds because there's some saturation going on there. But there wasn't. I made sure that I was the only device on the channel that we were using. And I tried moving it. Like I said, I had 3 of these devices, so I tried, each one of the devices. It simply didn't work. I tried going through the gigabit switch and then into the access point, and then I tried just directly plugging into the router itself, the Edge router. For those of you that don't know, the Edge router Lite only has one LAN port, one WAN port, one LAN port. So you're kind of restricted. But the nice thing with the Edge router, or the unified access points, is that it has 2 ports, one for the input and one for the out. And so you can daisy chain these access points together if you'd like, or you could, route a cable to the access point and then the outgoing, plug it into a switch and plug it into other things. So it acts like a hub. So I couldn't get it to work. I tried going to the forums. They were absolutely useless. I tried, Google searching. I work in IT, and I know that that's the mantra of everybody on the internet, that tries to say that they know what they're talking about. Oh, I work in IT. But I actually do work in IT. I work for a hospital, and I worked for a large insurance company. I've done over 10 years of IT experience. So troubleshooting isn't something new to me, So I tried everything under the sun to get this access point to function. I tried Googling to see if somebody else had had that problem. And of course, I saw a lot of threads where people were like, yeah, we're getting crap speeds. In the end, I had to abandon the entire thing. I sold my Edge router Lite. I sold my access points. I got rid of everything except for the switches, because they were Linksys, and it's always nice to have extra switches. So that was my experience, and I want you to know that it's possible for you to have that experience, but you should, consider it, based off of others' feedback as well as mine, not just my feedback. The other thing that I didn't like as much was that the access points didn't have any sort of GUI you could log into. SSH was open, so you could SSH into the device. But really, the configuration, the way that it worked, was you downloaded the software onto a computer on the network, and then you plugged the access point in, and then you assigned your LAN NIC an IP address within a certain range, and that would allow it to communicate with the access point and configure it. That's overly complicated to me. You know, for like a small business and for business enterprise and that sort of stuff, you know, that's fine. You know, they certainly have to do the same thing with Cisco switches or anything like that where they have to console in, you know, they have to do some sort of configuration to get into it. But for me, when I go to Best Buy or I go to Newegg or I go to Amazon, wherever I go and buy my router, I plug it in, I you know, make sure that the connection, the cablings are correct. Then I open my web address and go to 192.168.1.1 or whatever it is. You know, I enter the default username and password, and I use the web browser to configure it. I don't have to change my NIC card settings. So that was a kind of a problem for me. I didn't like that it required that step to configure. And I didn't like that the only way to configure the devices was through this application. So once you've got it configured and you upload the configuration changes, you can deploy the device and it's ready to go. And then from that point on, you know, you connect to the network and it would, you know, you could manage it using the software on your computer. In an enterprise or a small business environment, that's perfect, and that makes sense. You know, I'm used to that. You know, the Cisco APs are the same way. You know, you can, and it really is great to have one location where you kind of manage all the access points. But for a home user, I don't want to have to do that. I'd like to rather, you know, there's got to be a different option, whether it's a web GUI on the devices, you know, and the software on your computer just says, hey, these are the two access points that I recognize, you know, and you double click on it and it opens in a browser. Or, you know, maybe they have the software where it's got the configuration changes and you can choose which access point you're trying to make those changes to. And then the software just TFTPs that config file to it. Because the GUI within the software, it's unrefined, it's a little clumsy, it's hard to understand, it's not a polished product. So, that's my review of the Ubiquiti unified APs. The router was magnificent. I had zero complaints with it. But I wanted, you know, I got the router because I was getting those access points. And so I was going to have an entire Ubiquiti family as my network. Since I couldn't use the access points the way that I felt like I should have been able to, then that's that. So that's my experience. Hopefully this helps you. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, subscribe, like it if you don't like it, thumbs down if you don't, and let me know, you know, what your guys' experience is. Have you used the unified access points? Did you have the same experience? Did you have a better experience? You know, let me know. Also, let me know what you'd like to see more of on the channel. I'm getting through with the water cooling stuff, and I've got a lot of videos for the water cooling stuff. So I'm kind of going through those and uploading those as I go along. But along the way, I'd also like to make other content, you know, to kind of, you know, entertain you folks. That's kind of what the channel's about. It's about, you know, bringing information, being entertaining, and being engaging with my audience. So you let me know what you think down in the comments. Like and subscribe. And as always, I will catch you next time.